Hello, Sarah Sabin, executive and team coach here in the Leading in the Modern Way video interview series. And I'm thrilled to have with me today Josh Meyer, who is the CEO at Fintech Digital. Josh, welcome to the show. And would you like to briefly introduce yourself to my listeners?
Yeah. Hi, Sarah. Thanks for having me. Of course. So, I'm the founder and CEO of Fintech Digital. We're located in Chicago. We're a digital marketing agency, and we provide performance marketing and technology for fintechs, companies, brands, and banks. So, with performance marketing and technology, we provide the two big things that people need: customer acquisition and then customer engagement and retention. And then we also build technology like websites, CRMs, and we work with metrics and analytics and all the fun stuff like that.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing about that. So, getting right into the heart of things, you've been going for a while now, so it's been nearly 8 years. And well, that's according to LinkedIn anyway.
Right.
If you were to cast your mind back to the origins of the business, what were some of the significant challenges that you faced in growing the business to its current stage, and how did you overcome those?
Yeah. So the first big challenges were being able to enter into the financial markets. I didn't have a lot of connections in finance. I didn't, work in finance in a past life or anything like that. In fact, I never even worked at a big agency or anything. I just started agencies. So getting in the door with both local and national and then global financial brands was just pure grit, but we managed to make it happen. I guess the other really challenging piece for me was, it's a different animal serving finance brands. They expect so much more out of us. It feels like we're so much more under the microscope than when we've served other brands in the past. Like in the past, we did serve non-finance brands as well, like the American Bar Association and CPG companies and things, and felt like we weren't nearly under the microscope like we were with the brands we are now. So oftentimes now we're working directly with the founders or the CEOs of the company, and they're a little bit more challenging. We got to be a little bit more on point with everything we do. So finding team members who had both a lot of skill, but that were highly emotionally intelligent was probably the hardest challenge I've had so far. And really the way I was able to get those types of employees was I finally cracked the code by bringing on an operations manager who had worked for the government. And I also have a good mentor, a good agency mentor. I believe everybody should have a really good mentor. So between my mentor, we vet everything through him. And then our operations manager, she uses the same basic structure for interviewing that she used for the government, which is more like performance-based questions. So it's no longer, can you do this or can you do this or show me some of your work, but it's tell me about a time when you've done this and what were the outcomes, right? So it really, makes them level up and actually tell the story, and you can see right through whether or not or how well they're going to do, and things along those lines. So, yeah.
So the 2 points there to summarize. So number one, at the beginning, getting the foot in the door with financial institutions, and the second thing was bringing on the right people to serve the clients that you work for. So if we were to look at both of those points, how did you get your foot in the door at the beginning with some of these institutions? Did you do specific things?
I'd like to be able to reverse engineer it and say it wasn't just pure grit and just keep it going. But I think a lot of times in business, that's what it is the guy at the end of the day who wins is the guy who just simply doesn't quit, right? So it honestly started off with, a little bit of web development for like a local Chicago finance brand. And then that, leveled up to larger projects for Chicago brands. And eventually I made a name for myself. And then we're working with national brands. And then it really started to hit scale when I was able to go to more events and I had a name in the space and things along those lines. And I just kept pushing and never gave up.
No, I love that. I mean, grit and resilience is 100% part of the entrepreneurial journey.
It's everything.
And, the other thing I was hearing there is to take each bit as a step to get to the next step. So start small, then get a bit bigger, then get a bit bigger. And then on that process, you've built the credibility that allows you to go to the bigger brands. So I guess the point I'm trying to make here is it didn't happen overnight.
No, it was for sure not an overnight success. And it took me a couple of years even to get my first financial brand through the door. And then I had to have a plan for, the idea was I eventually wanted to work with more banks. But how is a guy who has no finance background going to get his foot in the door to working with global banks, right? So proving myself in the fintech space, which is on the fringes of finance. And, if you ever work on the fringes of an industry that's already doing well, right? Health and wealth are really the two of the biggest ones, right? You can really accelerate fast, so I always give that advice to people, like, if you can find something that is accelerating on the fringes of what you're of a already successful industry, and then find a way to tap into that, you can ride that all the way up to the top of that industry.
I love that advice. And to cover your second point, so bringing in the right people to serve clients. I just want to zero in on what you said, and I would call the kind of interviews that you're talking about competency-based interviews. So they are situational, someone gives a tangible example rather than fluffy, sort of vague answers. So when you started applying that technique, and you started building that team, did you also, through that process, manage to identify people that fitted in with the values and culture that you have?
100%. Yeah. And that was one of the biggest challenges. I'm glad you mentioned values and culture and our mission of the agency, because the reason we started Fintech Digital was because it felt like all of the other agencies out there, or most of them that were serving finance brands, they were very much like big banks. They were very much like mega banks, right? They felt very big and bureaucratic, and feels like they didn't fit in with the industry ethos of fintechs, which are fast moving and they have to be efficient and things like that. And so, it was a challenge to find people that thought that way, that didn't come from the big agency background or come from the finance background, but came from just the right background for what we needed.
Okay, so essentially, because you were looking for people a bit different from the traditional, they gravitated towards the culture that you'd built. Is that correct?
Yeah. Eventually, we just interviewed until we found the right people that were just absolutely clicked into place and were the right fit. But it wasn't easy. We'll interview 50 or 100 people before we find somebody that's a good fit, because we're very pragmatic with how we hire.
Well, the pragmatism is a good thing, and the quote from Tony Robbins springs to mind: hire slow, fire fast. And if you hire slow, you're probably going to be firing less people fast.
Yeah. We've had to, unfortunately, let more than a handful of people go over the years. Not that they weren't great people or that they weren't skilled, but they just couldn't, as we like to say, think like a fintech and meet our clients where they are.
So in terms of the leadership of your team, how do you personally define strong leadership, and how do you see it impacting the growth of your company?
Yeah, so I would say strong leadership is somebody who's willing to hire smarter people than them, put their ego aside, and stand back and let those people that are smarter than them do what they're better at than you, right? So from the jump, I knew I was not an organized guy, right? So I had to get organized project managers and account directors, and even admin people that could organize files and even help organize my email. and things like that. And I don't see it necessarily, at first I saw it as a weakness, and things along these lines, but I realized that over the years that I can find people that are smarter than me. So now I have an operations manager that's better at managing people than me. I have project managers and account directors that are much better with people than me, and they're much better at driving projects forward, making sure they get done to completion, and they're more emotionally intelligent than me to boot. So those people are out there, and it took a lot of like self reflection to realize that. But I think one of the biggest problems that I see with agencies and agency owners is their egos are this big, right? And they can't get out of their own way, right? And so they end up self-limiting their growth, and they never get past like the million and a half mark or something like that. And they stay there for years and years and years. And there's nothing wrong with that. If that's where the owner wants to be and it's profitable, but we've always had aspirations to grow something much bigger.
It's really interesting, Josh, because I was just running a mastermind group before this call, and this exact thing came up of, in a leadership team perspective, if you've got one person that has to be the smartest person, who controls everything, who has the big ego, watching the drip down impact of that. And it basically means, as you say, it limits where the company can go, which is fine if you accept that. But most people have much bigger aspirations, but don't see how they're actually holding themselves back from that.
Yeah, and I think that's really very true, that lack of vision and that lack of understanding of oneself, it's just huge amongst agency owners. But from what I've seen, agency owners, they know that, and I guess entrepreneurs in general, they know that they're special, right? They know that they've been able to do this amazing thing or build this amazing thing, likely by themselves or with one other person, right? And so I feel like, they feel that nobody else can do it, right? And sometimes nobody else can do that thing, right? And that thing gets messed up a little bit, or there may be some hiccups. But if you just keep pushing and working with them and building trust with them and letting them have accountability, the whole team continues to grow, right? Instead of just the entrepreneur or just the leader growing, because that's a self-limiting prophecy right there.
Yeah, 100%. And, I just want to also pick up on what you said about, if you're self-aware, you know what your weaknesses are, and you have people to support that. And it also means letting go of the concept that you as the leader needs to know every single thing for fear that you look stupid, or whatever reasons people have to not want to admit, I don't know everything. I have weaknesses. I have things I'm not good at.
Yeah. But being able to say, hey, Mr. Client, I understand that I'm not the best person. Even if it seems like a simple answer, it feels like the older I get, the less I know, right? And now it feels like when people come to me and I don't know an answer or something, I just say, I'm going to go to the team, and now it's almost like a panel of us that come up with the answer, and are able to provide it back. When before I felt like, I'm the guy that has the ultimate definitive answer because I've done this the longest. I know the most about the industry, but it's those little fine points and different ways of thinking about things, I think, that like enriches the entrepreneur or the owner's ability to even articulate that back to the client, in many cases.
Yeah, and diversity of thinking leads to more innovative solutions. But there's also the point of, if you were to take a holiday, take a month off, or I don't know, whatever it is, you have confidence that your team are able to come up with a solution without you being there to control everything.
Exactly. And I've had to take time off before. Over the pandemic, we had, my wife was pregnant with our first child, and this is no secret. I've told a lot of people about this, but she was diagnosed with breast cancer. So I had to step away for several months and let my team take the reins, and nothing fell apart like I thought it would, right? I thought it would all fall apart, but it all turned out okay. And I think at the end of the day, it made everybody stronger. And I think, I hope that situation never happens to anybody else, but I think that it's a good stress test for any business to be able to just take a month off and know that things will go wrong a little bit. That some things may fall apart. You may lose some clients and things like that. But at the end of the day, they're probably not the best clients, not the best clients that you want,
Mm,
from what I found.
yeah. And in terms of how you approach leadership, how have you invested in yourself as a leader, and what steps do you take to grow and evolve in your role?
Yeah. So, I'm at the stage where like self-improvement, I believe, is as important, if not more important, as improving the business. And then the fact that I work in finance, it's so relationship based, right? And so really, I've invested a lot into growing myself, into being around other entrepreneurs and in entrepreneur groups and mastermind groups. Like you said, I'm not actually in any mastermind groups, but I'd be interested in learning more about yours. But I'm in entrepreneur groups, and I've invested more into joining like the types of clubs that I would have never joined before, like downtown Chicago type of clubs. But um, it's the only way really to meet the type of people that can excel you in your career, because I used to think it was what I knew that would excel me, but I think more it's usually a who, not a how, that gets you there.
Mm.
So meeting those right people, I feel has done more to accelerate my career, whether it's mentors or other people in the industry, than even the self-improvement piece, right?
Well, we learn so much by being around other people. And I think that can go two ways. It can be what not to do and how not to be. And it can be the flip
That's a
side
huge
of that.
piece, yeah.
Yeah. I think people underestimate that piece of, we learn a lot about what we want by seeing the opposite of it.
Yeah, I did an exercise. It's like earlier this year, maybe late last year. I'd always like thought about what I want, journaled about what I want, journaled about what I wanted to be. But I took 10 minutes to journal about what I don't want. And that was one of the most impactful exercises I've ever done, right? To have a list of 50 things I don't want to be ultimately responsible for this. I don't want to feel this way in meetings. I don't want to lead with this sort of thing, right? And really, that set me down a better path of what I do want than anything else.
Yeah. So, final question, Josh. I would love to know, if you could go back in time and speak to your 20-year-old self, what piece of advice would you give to him?
That's a really good question. I grew up in central Illinois, and I live in Chicago now, but I grew up in a small farming community. There was not a lot of self-development. It was a lot of drinking, alcohol, and cornfields and things along those lines. And the bar was set pretty low, right, for where somebody from a small town like that might end up. And we do have several successful people, that went to school with me. But after I graduated, it was funny. I always went to like bookstores, and the self-development section always interested me a lot, but I never really knew how to take those first steps. I've always said I'm really interested in self-development, but like I don't know how to go about even doing that. And I think there's a lot of people who kind of wade in the shallows and think I want to do this thing or that thing, but they never really take the first step. So back to your question, I would say I would tell myself to just, if there's something that you want, don't think small and just take action on it, right? Like, I guess a good example, and this is maybe not a completely related example, is, I'm the king of to-do lists, right? I have so much going on. I have to use Todoist and Evernote and all these systems. I call it the operating system for my life. But everybody is always like asking me, they're like, how did you get so organized? How do you know a week ahead of time what you want to do? That took 5 years of planning those systems. And it all started with one book that was like a 10-page pamphlet on how to make a correct to-do list, right? But if I hadn't even started by reading that little to-do list pamphlet, and then in that to-do list pamphlet, I learned about Todoist. And then I started watching videos about Todoist on YouTube. And then I learned that system, and then that grew into more systems and things like that. So I would tell myself to just take action. If you know that there's something that you want to do, you don't have to know what the end result's going to be, or how you're going to get there. You just have to like take action towards it and just take the first step and then just keep walking.
Yeah, I love that. And it's so important. If you wait for things to be perfect and you quote unquote know everything to take action, you'll never achieve anything. And
So true.
Favorite quote, Lao Tzu's the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. You know, a lot of people get overwhelmed by setting big goals, but big goals are accomplished by small steps taken consistently.
That's it. Yeah. And I wish more young people understood that. Just start to take steps and you'll get to where you want to be, right? But it all starts with that first step, right?
Yep. Yep. I love that. That is a great note to end on, Josh. And on that note, thank you so much for being part of this series and this conversation today, which I've really enjoyed.
Me too. Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. And to all my listeners, I hope that you enjoyed this conversation as well. If you would like to take part in the Leading in the Modern Way video interview series, please do reach out. Take care and bye for now.